What knowledge is of most worth? Teacher Knowledge for 21st Century Learning. Week 3. Seminar by Emily Pinganelli, Kylie Savage, Jillian Stutt, and Ashley Van Wright.
Today, youth and adolescents are digital natives. Our students were born into a media-saturated world, and their lives revolve around technology, sometimes without even being aware of it. These technologies include devices used in education or for leisure, for example, laptops, tablets, TVs, or gaming consoles, or even practical things that are used in everyday life. In a day and age where technology is everywhere, it is important to ask the question, what knowledge is of most worth in the 21st century? During today's seminar, we will explore and discuss this question, as well as the specific implications for teachers and how this question relates to the broader questions in education. When thinking of the core media literacy, we know that all media messages are constructed and that they are done so using a creative language with its own rules. We also know that different audiences experience the same media messages in different ways. Lastly, all forms of media, the article in question today included, have embedded values and points of view which are represented, and most media messages are organized for a specific reason or purpose. This media message was created by a group of authors, some of which are researchers, professors, and doctoral candidates at Michigan State University, with the intended purpose of the article being to present and describe the kinds of knowledge that researchers state are integral for success in the 21st century. The techniques used to attract the reader's attention and engage the reader throughout the article include images and charts, like the one presented in the slide, as well as questions to ponder and reflect on throughout the article. The authors also organized the article into paragraphs separated with bolded headings and subheadings. Let's look more closely at some of the key messages included in the article. We will start off by discussing one of the key aspects of the article, which is the distinction between three 21st century learning frameworks. Each of these frameworks are outlined and expanded on in the reading. The three frameworks are fundamental knowledge, meta-knowledge, and humanistic knowledge. Let's take a few moments to further explore each of these types of knowledge and the value that they each hold for teaching and education. Foundational knowledge is the ability to apply academic knowledge to real-world problems, and the competence to use knowledge and literacies that you have already been introduced to as needed in both personal and professional realms. Meta-knowledge includes the ability not only to use technology in basic, predetermined ways, meaning using the technology in the way that it was designed and developed to be used, but to actually reuse and repurpose technology to meet specific educational needs, as well as teaching and learning goals. Humanistic knowledge is critical in an increasingly globalized and interconnected world, where different cultures have to meet and interact. In contexts like this, developing a value system that respects differences and maintains a core of empathy and understanding becomes critically essential. We will discuss humanistic knowledge in detail shortly. Based on these descriptions of each of the frameworks, it is understandable to think that each of these frameworks brings some sort of value to teaching and learning. The image shown on the slide is taken from the article, showing the three frameworks as both their own entities, as well as the interconnectedness of them. So let's return to our question. What knowledge is of most worth? Is it fundamental knowledge? Is it meta-knowledge? Or is it humanistic knowledge? Is it perhaps a combination of the three? These three types of knowledge are all valuable for their own reasons and are not completely independent from one another. The answer to our question is one that can be answered differently by each individual, and in terms of which framework is the most useful, especially as future educators, is not clear-cut. As mentioned in the article, although 21st century frameworks are thought to advocate new types of knowledge, little has actually changed in the new century with respect to the overall goals and needs of education. Despite this sense of continuity, significant changes related to how technologies change all three types of knowledge need to be acknowledged.
Each major category of framework can be seen as what we need to know, how we act on that knowledge, and the values we bring to our knowledge and actions. We found two key arguments emerged in this article. First is that the review of the framework suggests that nothing has changed. The division of what we know, how we act on that knowledge, and what we value has always been important. On the other hand, although these foundational ideas have always been key to learning, especially in technology and globalization, everything has changed. The argument that nothing has changed argues that the world will continue to depend on specialized knowledge and high levels of cognitive skills such as creativity and critical thinking. These skills are required for learning and achievement in any time, including but not limited to the 21st century. Additionally, interpersonal skills like life skills, leadership, and cultural competence have also been important in the past and will continue to be in the future. As a group, we disagreed with the point made in the article. We believe that knowledge in the 21st century has changed and will continue to change as society progresses. Changes can be seen in all the foundations. Changes to the foundational knowledge include content that has been altered with rapid advancements of technology. So, for example, medical research, specifically cancer research. Scientists and doctors know far more about cancer than they did 20 or even 10 years ago. They're able to share their research with people around the world and make further advancements. Today, we now also have instant access to information. Almost everyone carries a cell phone in their pocket, which allows them at any time to gain answers to any questions they have simply by Googling it. Cross-disciplinary knowledge has also seen a change. We are able to make connections and interactions between different fields of knowledge with resources like the internet or virtual libraries. The ability to use information is ultimately different in the 21st century than it was in the past. Changes to meta-knowledge can also be seen, such as the transformation that problem-solving has had from technology, which is largely because of the vast amount of knowledge that is available instantly on the internet now. It is also a lot easier to communicate and collaborate with people globally. Platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams allow people from anywhere in the world to meet virtually. Humanistic knowledge, which may seem like the most distant knowledge from technology, has still been modified in the 21st century. Although ethical and emotional awareness is not new to the 21st century, they are uniquely important when working with diverse groups of people. Humanistic knowledge becomes more important with an increasingly globalized and interconnected world, where people are required to interact with people of different backgrounds and cultures. An experience that I'm sure many people have experienced is teaching during COVID-19. COVID clearly shows the changes that have occurred with meta-knowledge. Without technology, students would not have been able to learn virtually when the schools closed. With technology, students are still able to see their teachers and communicate in real time with their peers and teachers. When they have a question, they're able to ask the teacher and get their response immediately, rather than waiting for the next day, calling them, or emailing them. The changes in knowledge are also demonstrated with this class. With resources like the discussion board, on Blackboard, we are able to communicate and collaborate with our colleagues while we're not in the same classroom. I've seen changes that have taken place in the framework of humanistic knowledge, specifically in cultural competence and ethical and emotional awareness. In my high school human development class, we did virtual pen pals. So we used an online resource to virtually communicate with people all around the world. Because of the changes that have happened with knowledge, we were able to learn about different cultures with someone who was actually a part of that culture. If someone were to try to do this activity in the past, it would have been much more difficult. They would have needed to write a letter, send it, wait for the person to receive it, and then wait for their reply. With a website like the one we used, we were able to communicate with our pen pal much faster than if we were to send them letters in the mail. This activity also developed our knowledge and skills for success in a culturally diverse society. We were able to imagine ourselves in someone else's position because we were able to form a relationship and connection with the people that we were writing to. As society progresses, we acquire deeper understanding of knowledge and are able to change knowledge. We develop our own knowledge by continuing to grow and change along with society.
Whether we like it or not, our lives really revolve around technology. Technology is important, but knowing when and why we use it within our classroom is even more important. Technological advances have brought us closer together, yet at the same time further apart. The use of technology has made physical proximity optional, not only in the world of education, but in the world of medicine and business. We can think of this during the pandemic. Technology has allowed us to stay connected with our loved ones from near and far, has allowed schools to continue educating elementary and secondary school students. It has allowed us to go forward in our own education and has allowed many people to continue working. The use of technology allows for many interactions to be effortless. With this being said, there are many instances for increased interactions across countries and around the world, and we as teachers need to know how to cultivate cultural competence, leadership skills, and emotional awareness to not only facilitate interactions, but to foster meaningful relationships and interactions among others. We're just going to dive in a little deeper to the implications for education and how the issues in this article have related to these broader questions in education. We're just going to focus really on one of the frameworks for the purpose of this presentation, but keeping in mind that all the other frameworks can also pose these broader questions in education. So when we began reading this article, we really got the bigger picture of what it means when someone says 21st century learning. And this is from our emergent categorization scheme. So it is clear that the distinction illustrated between the three frameworks that were previously mentioned are not clearly cut and that there are overlaps between these frameworks, but the emergent framework provides us with a more direct vision of a field in which has been influenced by numerous conflicting perspectives. So this leads us to our perception of how the issues in this article relate to the broader questions in education. And a question that we pose is, how are we as teachers offering a vision for learners' self and its location in the broader global and social context? So as previously mentioned in the third framework of humanistic knowledge, we as educators need to foster this knowledge in our students as it will create for lifelong learners beyond the classroom. It'll impact them in many aspects of life, their jobs, their careers, and in many roles of leadership. Students having an understanding of cultural competence is essential in both economical and social aspects of life, as we all know that our society is very culturally diverse from globalization. So therefore, integrating this competence within lessons and encouraging behaviors and modeling behaviors within the classroom should really be seen as essential. Having ethical and emotional awareness is a knowledge and skill that is necessary for students to succeed within our culturally diverse society, as this will give students the ability to picture themselves in other people's shoes, understanding how other people feel, understanding other people's emotions, and having the ability to engage in ethical decision-making, and just overall being successful within human interactions. So providing our students with the ability to go into someone else's shoes, to understand emotions, teach about emotions, and just simply giving our students the ability to make their own decisions and having interactions with students within the classroom or even students from other schools or students from different grade levels, having students go read to older students go read to younger students or vice versa. So I think today living in a society that is so culturally diverse, this section of the framework needed to be emphasized within this presentation and also needs to be emphasized within the classroom, as no one will truly ever succeed without understanding this framework, as in most careers or just in life in general, we deal with people. And with this being said, we as educators need to provide these rich opportunities for our students to engage in a variety of different activities that will foster this sense of emotional and ethical awareness as well. So, like I said before, all the other frameworks we previously talked about relate to these broader questions as well. Just because they have led to new findings and have categorized these frameworks, and essentially the question of why and what we do while educating our students is from these frameworks. And the reason we do things within our classroom always has a sense of purpose, whether it's intended to or whether it's not. But we as teachers should always be modeling what we want our students to take away from our classrooms.
Finally, we've come up with 3 discussion questions which relate directly to what we've just discussed, and we hope that these contribute to your learning today. So our first question: what knowledge is of greatest worth at a time of flux and change? So this question comes directly from the article and its title. The authors discuss how we experience rapid changes in technological advances, as well as cultural changes and forces of globalization, which make it difficult to navigate as educators what exactly we should be teaching our students. They also ponder how teachers should or can be trained in order to prepare students for their future. We feel like there's no one correct answer to this question of what knowledge is of greatest worth at a time of change. However, we do agree with each other that knowledge itself, as well as what knowledge is considered important, fluctuates greatly over time. One thing that seems to stay constant, however, is core values of educating. And these values were identified by the authors as to know, to act, and to value. As what is known in and about the world around us evolves, the way we interact with this knowledge and how we relay it changes accordingly. So let's bring COVID back as an example for proof of this statement. The way the world has responded to COVID-19 shows how evolved information can change our reactions to things. There was a point in time where we were told not to wear masks and that we should save them for strictly healthcare professionals. Since then, obviously, we've had more research be unveiled, and now mask mandates have been in place all over the country. So that's just one example of how changing information always changes the way we react to things. And the same thing happens all the time in education, with research showing how children learn differently, for example. A decade ago, or when we were in school, when we were children, there was very little talk of accommodations, modifications, stuff like that. There were no IEPs, or at least not to the level that we have them at today. And now IEPs are very common. We see them used in virtually every classroom, often for multiple students. This is a result of new discovered knowledge. So it seems that the time of flux and change is always. So how can we determine what knowledge is of greatest worth at any given time? We feel that the answer is truly up in the air, awaiting interpretation, and doesn't have a single correct answer. Our second question for discussion is: how can teachers make sure they use technology in their classrooms effectively and without relying on it entirely? The reality of today is that it's simply impossible to completely eliminate the use of technology in schools. In fact, it would likely be counterproductive to not use any technology, since technology has just become so widely used. It's such a widely used component in today's world. You go out and you see technology everywhere. If you don't know how to use technology, you are definitely behind in some aspects. But almost anyone will tell you that there is a point where too much reliance on technology may occur, especially in classrooms. It's important to find a balance between the necessary inclusion of technology and the over-reliance of technology. As educators, it's critical we think about how we use technology with our students. Technology students will use in a classroom tends to differ from technology they use at home. For example, children use iPads and the TV at home typically, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can easily figure out how to use an interactive whiteboard at school or a computer for learning purposes. One way we've decided would be an active approach to using technology effectively in the classroom, as well as not over-depending on it, is keeping technology usage interactive. This means that rather than allowing students unmonitored computer time every day, we'd use technology alongside them. So a great example of this would be an interactive whiteboard, as I just mentioned. Students can use the interactive whiteboard together, and they can learn how to use it while simultaneously learning something else, making this also a possible cross-curricular lesson every day. So for example, students can have different subjects, whether it be math, social studies, science, whatever, on the interactive whiteboard that day. And this strategy keeps students engaged and also keeps the lesson focused on the teacher and the lesson, rather than letting students kind of nod away from the lesson and using technology for their own wants. An example of this, I remember personally, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, we would have like computer time every day. And I remember when the teacher would walk away, you switch tabs, go on Facebook, go on Webkins, whatever it might be. And then when they come back, you just switch over your tab, make it look like you've been working. Super easy for students to take advantage of this situation if they're not being monitored. There's a very similar debate often made with parenting when it comes to this issue of what's too much technology usage. Do parents give their child too much screen time? How much screen time is considered appropriate or helpful to the child? It really depends on the person, but we believe that finding interactive ways to incorporate technology into lessons is the best way to achieve this goal of effective technology. If your students become so invested in the technology aspect that they begin losing the point of the lessons in a cross-curricular activity, for example, then you may have reached a point where you've relied on technology too much. Our third question for discussion is, multiple groups and authors mentioned in the article suggest that current schooling practices are designed to prepare students for the industrial age rather than the needs and demands of the new millennium. Do you agree with this statement? Why or why not? So we pondered on this statement for a little bit, and we thought of reasons as to why we both agreed and disagreed with this statement. In the sense of what has been taught, we disagree. Yet in the sense of how students can be taught, we find ourselves agreeing entirely. So let's explore the disagreement of what is being taught first. Just moments ago, we talked about how technology is becoming a part of not only our lives, but our teaching of other aspects of curriculum. And as I mentioned even earlier, we see accommodations, modifications, individual education plans implemented in schools today, and they're vastly different from how schools operated a decade ago. We believe education continues to evolve with the constantly changing world. As for the agreement of how students are being taught, our opinions on standardized tests have grown stronger and stronger against them as we've gone through this 5-year program. While many things should be memorized and ingrained into our brains over time, there are just so many things we test children on that we believe simply don't need to be memorized. One specific example we all agreed on was being tested on direct quotes from stories and novels such as like Shakespeare. While learning general ideas and having an understanding of classic novels does make sense in pop literature, being deducted points off a test because you mixed up the word rotten with the word foul or whatever it may be just doesn't make sense to us. Another example of tests not being useful or as useful as they are common is spelling bees. If you want a student to learn how to spell a word correctly, use it in front of them. Model the use of the word and have them get used to seeing and using it, rather than putting them under pressure to learn the word for the test specifically. Many students don't learn effectively using tests, and it's clear why. There's so much pressure on them, and using knowledge long-term rather than cramming it into your mind for a short-term purpose, for a quiz or a test, and then never using it again, will always be more effective. Okay, now it's your turn. Answer one of the following questions. When it comes to knowledge, do you fall more towards the nothing has changed or everything has changed argument? Why? Students are digital natives. What implications does this hold? How does a digital native think, learn, and understand the world around them differently from someone who has not been as subjected to modern technology?